67-4.
Exemption number 3.
Exemption number 3.
So let's discuss that. So the board agreed to scratch what was there for sub-item 3 and replace it with the things that I had come up with. In the interim, Martha looked at that, because I had sent her what the board agreed to, and came back with a proposal to use a different organization. And so we agreed to that in principle. And so the recommendation is that we use Martha's input for item 3.
So
She's in agreement with that.
We substitute this, Martha, you can see
No,
right
no,
here.
no, no.
Substitute this for this. This goes away,
Right.
and this gets put in its place that talks about the Department of Agriculture.
No,
Does it say exhibits that
that's
are
the
part
wrong
of an
one.
organization
So
that
we
is
have-
accredited by
that's why
the...
you need,
That I have as deleted out.
yeah.
No,
You
it's
just
not
like-
back, yeah.
And it's one change, an organization instead of,
Here's what you want. Goodness gracious. You gotta use the tools. Watch this, it's right here. It's right here. This is the document. It's what we have as version 3. That's board's,
Yeah.
board's input after we changed it to and designee. Remember that part? Okay, that's what version 3 is. This includes Martha's comments after we've had discussions.
Right.
4 things. The first one we discussed here, she wants to keep in number 1. The second was to add the photographic opportunities.
Yeah.
And the third one is to replace what's here with this wording. 3, exhibits that are part of an organization that is accredited by, quote, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, close quote, parentheses, AZA.
You okay with that,
That's
Martha?
Martha's
Yeah,
wording.
that was my, so
Yes,
I just,
You okay with
that
that,
was
Dick?
your input.
I just want to
Well,
say,
yes.
I
Just
just
a
want to
minute.
say that the AZA is the same organization that was in the original bylaw, but they changed their name because there was another organization with a similar name and similar acronym that was turning up and as an accrediting body, and they were fake.
The good news is, it's resolved.
It's resolved, and I
Next.
just want to say very briefly that we took out the exemptions or the exceptions, the educational provisions for Mass Audubon and New England Wildlife. Those have been put in just to give a blanket
Martha,
exemption
the
to
reason
them.
that it was done
Just
before does not make a difference. We're just concerned about what things
So
feel
you've
right now.
explained your reasoning. I'm not trying to delay things, Dick, but I think it's important to understand the reasoning behind this on both sides.
I'm getting more and more concerned about the fact that we're gonna spend the
So, what
entire session on this
Hang
subject.
on, I want to resolve this
I
and
think
so
we're
on,
done.
and I don't want to have a voter revolt at town meeting because we're not getting clear. I think there's more agreement than I thought there was before. Are you okay with the language that Dick
Yes.
had just suggested?
Yes.
Are you okay with it, Dick? Changing this piece here?
I am, the board has not agreed to it yet. But
I-
I am.
all I
I
wanted-
am, but I am.
Good, I want the parties that care most and have brought this to be clear first, so that we understand what we're going at. My understanding is at this point, given that we have already taken care of 67-5, the only disagreement, or maybe I have not asked the question clearly enough, is what I will call A and B. Do we add the extra, do we restore the extra piece or retain the last phrase in 67-1? Is there any reason to take it out? This is the one that says
This is the one
thereby
that the Board of Health
preserve.
asked us to take out. Yes. That one may be in the question.
That,
So Martha's gave her opinion on it, and it's up to us. But I think everything else works out, right? If we add back,
I'm gonna get
which
to
the
that.
board has to agree to.
I'm gonna get to, I'm trying to work on this one right here.
Right.
I'm just trying to work on this one right now.
so the memo I referenced earlier from the Board of Health did not actually reference this particular item. We talked purely about enforcement. I just wanted to make sure that was clear because I
In their note, excuse me, Kevin, I'll go find their note. In their note, they asked that the material about the public health be taken out,
Okay.
correct?
I don't
Yes.
have that recollection.
Yeah, when you
I'll
did,
go find
when
it
you
and
did
we'll
say, if
discuss
they
it
don't,
again.
I don't
We've
disagree,
discussed
I
this
just haven't seen
before. We've had the
if
data.
they don't have enforcement authority, they don't want to have language about responsibility for public health in
Public
there. Because their definition of public health and a generic definition of public health are different, so they were concerned about that. So I would say safety and welfare, welfare includes health in a very broad sense. If we could just make it, and to thereby preserve and protect the general safety and welfare of the public,
I would agree to that.
okay? Does that make sense?
I don't agree with it.
Well, the fact that Wendy does not want to have it in there and says that it's problematic for her, to me, means that we probably ought to, I don't think it changes the substance in any meaning, I don't think it changes the substance in any meaningful form, other than the health department's concern about it implying responsibilities that they cannot undertake.
So what are you saying?
Leave out health, leave out the word health, that's all. Okay, we'll vote in a moment, and we'll see on that. Let's just see, that's an up in the air for right now. The next one, are you okay with adding photographic opportunities?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the only one that we're currently, that is an issue is the word in health in 67.1, 67-1. What I'd like to do is move that the edits, as we have discussed them and agreed, and is clear on the record here, be adopted for the warrant article with the exclusion of "and health." And you can propose an amendment if you're unhappy with that. But I have a motion on the floor. There's a second.
A second.
Okay, so we got a first and a second. I'd like to leave the word health out because Wendy has asked us to. That's what I'm going to.
The Board of Health had this general sense of public and things like that, that this is not about the public. You go find the stuff if you want it, whatever. So I'm willing to make an amendment to it that says the sentence in section 67(1) would end at the word "town of Topsfield," meaning the remainder of that sentence be struck, which is the way the board had agreed to it at our last meeting.
So-
Essentially, that's, I'm saying, put it
Yeah,
back
no,
the way
I-
it was, the board agreed to it at the last meeting.
So what I am, since we didn't take a board vote, agreement is a perception of consensus, not a matter of
Yes.
record. So I just want to be clear that the board hasn't agreed to that. It was left to be discussed further. There's an
It's a matter
amendment
of
on the floor.
consensus, is that what you said?
Yes. So for something to be amended.
And I'd like to add another amendment that I realize.
One amendment at a time, please.
Well, okay, we'll do it.
I want to do one at a
That's true.
time. So on this one right here, we have this amendment to the motion that's on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now we're gonna vote. So we'll take a vote. Dick, on the amendment, you vote.
Aye.
I vote nay.
I vote aye.
Okay, so you want to leave the word health in there.
Oh,
We're gonna
oh,
strike-
you make, we're gonna strike the whole
Strike
sentence.
That,
No,
we're gonna
Oh,
strike
his
the
amendment
phrase.
said take the
Your
last sentence
your
out.
amendment was to strike the whole sentence,
The
okay?
phrase, not the
Okay.
whole sentence.
Well,
The phrase after.
it's gonna end at the town of Topsfield, period.
And we have an issue here because this has to be passed by a majority of the board. We don't have a majority. Is it a
we do.
majority of just
We have a
those who are
majority.
present? If it is, then okay. Well,
3 people are a majority.
Is it a quorum?
no, I'm just getting clear.
Is it a quorum?
Yes, we have a quorum.
A
We do have a
quorum or a
quorum.
majority?
It's a majority of a quorum as opposed to a majority of the board. Just want to be clear. So in that case, the board is willing to, at this point, has amended the motion to accept all these changes with the exception to the motion amended to eliminate the last phrase of the sentence in 67-1. That is the motion on the floor.
Make another motion.
For another change,
Yes.
we have to vote on this one first. Oh, well, this is to accept everything. Okay, I agree, so I'll accept another amendment since this is to accept the whole thing. So is there another amendment you wish? That amendment is passed.
So they tried to work through the warrant. and do as we normally do things, I realized that we don't tend to have squirrely, long titles for bylaws. What we try to do is put bylaws in there that essentially have an eye catcher. You don't try to explain what they do or don't do, because then somebody could say whatever. So the way that the bylaws should read, and as we actually put it in some writing in this thing, we're going to strike the words in the title, prohibition of and for entertainment. It's just about wild and exotic animals, and somebody could say, you know, that it's not just entertainment, you know, we're really concerned about this,
So
we're
what-
concerned about that.
what is
So I
the-
just said simplify the
What's the,
title.
so what is
to
the amendment you're
Wild
proposing?
and exotic animal bylaw, which is typical of the way we write the title of the bylaws.
Is there a second? So there's a second for that. Martha, do you have any particular comments
Tell
on
me
that?
again, so you're suggesting taking out,
The very
It's just gonna
top,
read, instead it's gonna read wild and exotic
animals bylaw, it doesn't change anything else in the
Taking out the words
bylaw.
for
Just-
entertainment.
It just makes it a shorter bylaw, so you don't, when you go
Okay.
for search, see
yep,
prohibition of
That's fine.
wild.
That's the way everybody refers to it.
Okay, so we have a motion that has been, for an amendment, which has been seconded. I'll take a vote on it now. All those in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
I will say aye also to the title change. With that, is that it? Can we accept the changes that we have discussed as noted here? Deb, I think you've got them. With the two amendments of changing the title and dropping the last phrase of the 67-1 sentence so that it ends with the words Town of Topsfield. We have a first, we have a second, we're ready to vote. Is there any further discussion? Let's take a vote. I'm gonna go roll call on this. Dick?
Aye.
Aye.
And I will say aye. It passes unanimously.
Good.
Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Are you okay, Nancy? By the way, we can get any questions.
I'm sorry about the time. I know this has been very contentious. I remember how contentious it was before. I apologize for the length of time, but I'm glad we're doing it.
I don't think it was nearly as contentious as it was disorganized.
Well, not having things clearly.
We're not gonna have sausage for dinner, I can tell
I
you.
I knew where we were, but that's okay. Listen, thank you all for your patience on that.
thank you, John.
So, we're all set, Nancy, you're all set, and it's
And
your
you're invited to stay.
You're invited to stay.
Thank you.
So, what I'm gonna do now is go to the town meeting warrant and turn this back to Kevin, and take it away, please.
We,
Cut through it.
first disclaimer, obviously, I just wanna say, you know, thank you to everybody on this, on the work that went into the first draft of this warrant. It's a team effort. A lot of information that's contained here is a lot of hard work by a lot of people behind the scenes. Proud of the document, first go around at it, doing the warrant. There's obviously, after being submitted, there's things I even recognize that I would have done a little differently in a couple places, which I'm sure we'll cover. But it, at least for the most part, gives us a placeholder of how I understood prior conversations around items that were necessary or that we're looking at putting into the warrant. So, from just my approach on this, I took last year's warrant, the 2019, or 2020, my apologies, and went through it a number of times to better understand how it is, how it's set up. Made adjustments accordingly within this to try to capture some of the changes, such as the location of town meeting, for example. That's an important one to get right. So that as we go through, that's one item that was updated. The dates, etc., were updated in the beginning portion. The first article reports standard language as I understand it. Second article in this is the balance transfers. The highlighted section on the first version you have is the one number that we're double checking to make sure that the fund balance reserved for reduction of future excludable debt, 1226, $1,226 is the number. Once that number's verified, we'll take off that highlighter and that'll confirm the number that the total balance for the transfer as well as in the recommendation, the number that needs to be reflective of the total. Any questions on the first page? I'll also, I should say this too, I also, Selectman Gann and I worked on formatting as well, to make sure that this had a nice approach to
I
it.
appreciate that consistent level of detail, and I thank you so much for working that offline with us so that we could focus on the substance, so thank you.
Absolutely. The general operating budget, again, standard language in here. Those have been part of the FinCom meetings and the budget process so far. Right now, same as last year, there is a placeholder in here in the event that it's recommended and the Board of Selectmen feel it's appropriate to put down here an override.
So this one essentially still open. I don't have a particular problem with this format as it's laid out here. Does anybody have a problem? It's not finalized at all, in other words.
This one that says Tops Draft 2020.
So it's not finalized, it needs more work, obviously.
Need the
Okay.
numbers, need the
Does anybody have any problem with the format and the text of the wording?
I'm
Okay.
getting there.
The
Yeah,
one thing
I-
I am reminded of, it does say, please refer to attachment A. We did have an input from, Dave happens to be here. Are we interested, by the way, in trying to insert something about percent in there? That was a suggestion, I know it was passed around. We don't have to decide
Percent
now for
change
sure.
from last year.
Percent to percent, you know, is there an interest in doing that? I don't know. If there is, I would tweak what Dave put in, for example, I wouldn't put in 0.0%. I would just run the formula so that it says a 0, nothing, or a dash or something. Just to format a little bit.
Yeah,
If we
it does.
decide we want to consider putting, if we want to consider putting in percents, let me know.
If we're gonna put them in, they should go to 1/10%.
Yeah, okay, point one, that's.
All
I think-
around.
I think that's, did you do the point one? Oh, there it
The
is.
only other
It's no additional work.
The only other thing I might suggest, and it's as we go through the budget process, we'll better understand it, but if there's an item where there was a high percentage increase, maybe there's a note there too, just so that the public
agree.
has an understanding of why that is, because it might venture
Sure.
more questions than not if it's like a 5%, 10% or something grand.
So
That's
let-
the only other thing after seeing what David.
Let me ask a question, whether that should go, I'm trying to think of what to do this year to make sense. Should that go in the warrant as an attachment, or should it be information piece for people who go?
No,
If
it
it's-
has to be in the warrant.
It has to be in the warrant, okay, so if that's gonna be in the warrant as an attachment that's separate, then we're not fussing with this format of the
Right,
warrant.
right.
We're just adding a piece that'll be attached to the back.
That piece is already attached. This is just changing it a little bit by adding the percentage, that's
Yep.
all, to what goes in there anyways.
And so many numbers that still are gonna be moving,
The number's
this is
gonna
the-
change.
This is basically where we are with it right now.
It's just that we came here and I see the second sentence, excuse me, the second paragraph of the explanation says attachment A, and I said, oh yeah, that's right, we have, we shouldn't spend any more time on it.
Right.
Yeah, what I would,
Okay,
what I would
next,
think.
we really have a lot to do.
I
Let's-
know, but it just, in the spirit of this, if we're gonna do this, Kevin, can we ask you to incorporate that with notes where there are big changes? Find an appropriate way to adjust attachment A so it can include that with notes where necessary?
What I'd love to do is Catherine and I have already talked a little bit about this.
Okay.
And we'll come up with something and we'll present it to you long in advance to when
That's
we
good,
do
as
the
long,
final.
as long as it's on the to-do list, let's move on,
That's fine.
good. Next is, your reading.
So water department operating budget. So this was just basically taking what was in last year's proposed appropriation, putting it to fiscal 20, and then populating based on the numbers we received from the water department, what this year's budget looks like.
Obviously, there's something wrong with the sum of indirect costs.
On the second page, yes, so that was one item where I included the sum but the total, that's something already identified as a typo. So that was
The 2 million is wrong, it needs to be something like
161,000.
150 or something, what?
161,291. That number would be changed to
Okay, so
that.
that'll be fixed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Masconomet, is the format all right for Masconomet for everybody, that layout, it's the standard layout?
It's the
I don't
standard
see a
layout,
particular problem,
Standard stuff.
okay?
Yeah,
The
I'm okay
only
with
thing
that.
I might consider is adding in the explanation, something to the effect that the debt, the amount of debt is considerably less and is falling off. It's something about the debt, because it is a significant thing that happened. It went from 250,000 to 50,000.
How about I put in there, because I think it's relevant, that the operating budget increased by a percentage of 6,
Good,
the numbers,
gotcha.
and then
Gotcha.
say the debt reduction reduced it by this percentage, and the total percentage increase is this.
And the
In
total.
the case of the debt, I would do it by dollars, you know,
By
because
dollars,
it's so
okay.
obvious with the dollars. But I think one sentence, don't put a whole lot in there, but I
Yeah.
think that was a good idea to put those both in there.
Just an editorial comment, I was talking with Zilly last night, and the school committee has trimmed away some more fat. Our increase through Masco will be less than it was originally thought. We were talking about
Okay.
4.6, it's gonna be 3.4, something like that. It's still not quite what the FinCom wants, but they're hoping to avoid an override, hoping that.
And I just say, between this, the Tri-Town, Masconomic, and I'm starting to have conversations with Essex, got the budget pretty late in the process, but there's been some really good efforts made, I think on everyone's behalf, between FinCom, Board of Selectmen, and the school departments, whether elected or superintendents, to try to understanding the constraints of Topsfield. I don't know where we're gonna end up with it, but I just want to put that on the record. I know there's been some good faith efforts along the way.
Okay.
So Essex North Shore Agricultural and Technical School Department, we did just receive their budget, so those numbers will get plugged. And Selectman Gann and I did have a conversation around the consent agendas and.
Oh, wait, okay, so.
Oh, sorry.
So in the case of North Shore Essex.
Yep.
In the explanation, the last sentence is this thing about a draft motion based on preliminary assessment. Are we gonna have that? I don't think we have to have that, do we? They ought to get their act together, we shouldn't have to have that in there. Maybe you wanna leave the wording in there in case they haven't, if they've come back with a final budget, then we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think that's correct. So that would be something. If
So we're
we
gonna
have the
strike
final
that?
number. We strike, I'll confirm.
You know,
yes.
okay,
Yeah.
leave it, but we have to strike it if it is a final one. And the other thing is, are we sure that there are 18 students? Was that a number that you got?
Now that I literally got the budget, I think on Debbie Monday. I think it was after I submitted.
Like
So
yesterday.
I think it's 22 this year, so that will be updated as well.
So on October 1st of 2019, it was 22.
I'll double check. But yeah.
Whatever, the point is, it was on October 1st, that number is somewhat, okay, it needs to be done then.
So then going into the consent agendas, the Article 7, grant authorization for town projects, standard language that we've used historically.
Boilerplate.
Number in there is,
Article 7. The first consent
Yeah.
agenda has the single asterisks before the word article in each case.
That's right.
Oh, I know.
And then the
Sorry, I didn't know what-
Massachusetts Department of Transportation contracts, same
So that's pretty
language.
much boilerplate every year. Anybody have a problem?
Boilerplate, sure.
Okay, next.
Tri-Town Council on Youth and Family Services, that is boilerplate, except the number 20,500 is what historically has been used. That's the number we've been using in our analysis. FinCom or the board or anyone could tell me something different, we'll plug and play, but that's historically what's been the case. Same thing with senior care with the 1,500.
So I'll just say this for the future, to some extent, we typically try to get an idea of what the other towns are thinking and whatever else on that. And if other towns tend to go up because costs go up, sometimes we
Sure.
make adjustments that way. Next.
And one thing I'll mention too,
Senior care.
is we're just saying it out loud too, is I'm having conversations around, and I want to have this with KP as well, RFPing this, just so we can do a formal process around allocating grant funds. Not concerned with it, but I think just to dot our i's and cross our t's, maybe belt and suspenders, because I'm wearing them, I can say it today. Just make sure we're going through the right procurement process to allocate those funds out in the grant form. And that then takes us to the town facilities repair and maintenance. Consent agenda 2, the title, presumably this is
yeah.
where, as I understand it, where consent agenda 2 would be titled.
This does need to be titled in there, consent agenda 1, consent agenda 2.
Yep, and these would be the 2 asterisks. I didn't.
We do have 1 in there, but we don't have agenda 2.
Right, so,
What usually happens, what has happened
Yeah.
since we started consent agendas is the first consent agenda flies right through because it is all boilerplate.
Yep.
As soon as people see police SUV cruiser, they start pulling apart the second consent agenda. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah.
Every year,
Every-
same
So,
question.
We have to.
Why isn't the roof like that?
I
It'll
think so.
probably get pulled apart, but that's okay.
Well, it may be better to just
Steve
take
will
it out
have
so
it.
you don't have to pull it apart.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the town hall and
But that's up
library
to us to
telephone
decide.
system.
It's up to us to decide what we want to do about the second consent agenda.
My own expectation is, we can talk with Steve Whalen about this, but I would pull apart that second consent
Yeah,
agenda.
I
I
tend
think
to
it's
agree.
just too much stuff that is gonna.
So, can I ask a favor? In board docs, there is an administrative, I found it in the administrative section,
Mhm.
a version of the warrant that I have sent to Debbie and that she put in there that has markup on it. And so I think as we go through here, we're gonna wind up doing some discussion about the markup, and it would be helpful if we had that markup. If anybody else has got markup, we can merge the two together.
Yeah, I have the two, and I'm not seeing any changes so far.
So.
Oh, I see, a couple little, yeah, a couple little explanations.
Which one?
And so one of the things too, I'll just mention, sort of like the budget, the way I've sort of seen it in my mind, and if we want to go in a different direction, certainly fine with that, but we sent out version 1 of the budget, and then we, right off the bat, within, a couple days, just like in this version, you say, I missed that, or we wish we did it a little bit differently.
Uh-huh.
So one example is the page numbers. You'll notice in the version I sent you, the one on board docs and the one which I've sent to the FinCom has that updated, the page numbers. The original version actually, it didn't track the numbers correctly.
Yeah.
So everything had a set number of page 15. So that's been corrected.
What was the matter with what? Now we gotta be careful, now we're talking about real versions.
So the
The
version.
version that we dealt with on Saturday, you hopefully did some other things and it became the final.
So the version which, the page number on this, the version we worked off. of
What do I have
formatted.
to look at, what do I have to look at, the page number?
So the version I sent to you, Selectman Gant, the original one I sent to you on Saturday morning, that you then sent back, the page numbers, were all reading 15. I then corrected that in the
Okay.
version, so that I'm
That's
very
the
sensitive.
only change, so to speak?
That
I mean,
was
I
basically
can
it,
believe
'cause
that
I was
you
in-
made multiple ones, but as long
I've
as.
made multiple mistakes,
Well, all
yes.
no, I made multiple changes. The only thing I wanna know is, the one that I received in the mail Saturday afternoon, Saturday night.
5:30,
10
6 o'clock
whatever-
Saturday night, whatever it was.
it was. That's the one that everybody got, right? I got it, and that's the only one, excuse me, that's the only one, correct?
The only change that I'll say between the version that I sent out to just the board and the version that went to the town employees, the one that went to the FinCom, and the ones on board docs is the page number. Because as soon as I
Is
sent
it
it,
a different version?
I didn't title it
different
the
name?
version. I didn't name it anything different. The only reason I did that is because it was just the page number. And I just wanted to make sure it was clean. I didn't want to retitle it a version 2 just because of the page number.
No, but it can be, between you and I,
Yes,
version 1.1.
okay.
Not point, you can't do point, -1.
Sure. But I wanted to come to you because I wanted you to know that was the only change that was made. Because it was a big change, because if someone's reading this for the first time,
Got it.
you need to follow the
I have
pages.
it, I have it. But that's the only difference. Okay, good.
That's the only difference, exactly.
Okay.
Any other
So-
changes that I've identified, I've made handwritten notes on my copy, my copy, even the one I'm working off of has 15 on every page, just because that was the one I printed.
So here's,
So just let me, so the one that you sent out though has no changes on it. The one we're looking at, so to speak, as
The one on board docs, the one that
On
I sent
board
you,
docs.
is the verbiage
there's
you're
only
looking at is the
one
same.
on board docs open public content, right? There's only one, and it's the one that's on the right-hand side, second one down. All right, that's the one.
That is the same as the
Okay.
version that you have, except the page numbers are
Got it.
accurate.
And that's the one that we're all looking at.
So the content
And
we're
I'm
talking
trying
about
to
is the
ask
same.
if- And there's no changes to that.
Just the page number,
Right.
that's it.
So I'm asking that we consider bringing up the administrative content also, because in there, I have a number of changes. You know, for example, we were looking at Masconomet, the water department, and we had to change. Those things are already in there as comments that I have, so it may save some time if we can all look at those things at the same time. If you
I
just bring
don't
that one up.
understand what you're.
Which
I want
one
you
do you
to
wanna
bring
bring up?
I want you to bring up the
Under
administrative
admin.
content
Huh?
Go
with
down a little bit,
changes.
scroll down under admin.
Oh, do the admin version,
Yeah,
okay.
that's Dick's edits, and it's listed as such.
Are they significant enough that you
Yeah.
can't work them out
You'd be
with?
surprised.
All the way to the end?
If you scroll down just a little bit, you have public content and admin content
In board docs?
and board docs.
Board
So,
docs go
you're
here.
on a touchscreen.
You know,
So
I've got it,
back-
I know
back
exactly
out of
where
here.
it is, it's this
Okay.
right here.
Yeah. This one.
Yeah.
okay,
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 so
but
go
you-
scroll
go
down.
down here,
So that's yours, this one.
The changes.
that's the one you want?
These
That's
are the
that's
changes.
one with
They're-
Dick's,
they show
edits
right
already
here.
in it.
You
Okay.
change that. Some of these are changed. If they're red, they're changes.
The one place you could look at was back at the water department. Water department, you see the, no,
Down
no,
further.
the other way, I'm sorry.
Goes this way, they're up near the
Right,
top.
right, and so right, whoops, the water
Correct.
department.
Well,
What are you looking for?
vice chair, it's the same person.
I want to make sure I get the title.
Lynn is vice chair and clerk. That's your title.
You or Debbie need to be always owners of the latest official version. And my own preference, because it helps a lot, instead of just version numbers, I like to see 20-03-7. And if it turns out there's a second version on that day, sure to be. Because I think it helps us get a sense of how recently we looked at it. And Dick's right now, we're kind of a little bit lost because we not clear on the versions and so on. I'm also trying, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, literally, the version you have from the word for
No,
word is the same,
this
it's
is
just
just
the page number.
counsel for the future, I'm not worried at all about
What-
this version.
What I'm very sensitive to is the version control on this. I don't plan to do a version 2
That's mine, Dick.
ad
I'll
hoc
take care
as
of
we
it.
go. Like, I've already, like I said,
I want to recycle it.
after the
I just
conclusion,
wanted to get it off the table so I can come over that.
after the conclusion of sending this, I had already identified a few items. The only one, again, and I emphasize, the only one was in the footer of the document. Didn't change any of the contents because I'm very sensitive to version control. But for the public consumption, for Dave to go on and print it, I want to be able to, if he needs to say page 12, not look at 15 for the entire document.
If you put the version down in the footer though,
Yep.
I think it would take care of all of these questions.
Yeah.
You know, on each page.
Sure.
And then you can delete it when you print the final
Yeah,
warrant.
you can call it draft and then keep updating as it
Whatever
goes.
works, the date or whatever.
The reality is that the version that we did on the budget, where you would sort of have a version, collect a bunch of changes, then do another version.
That's the plan. That I'm not,
That doesn't work as well with this,
Okay.
because there's more minutia changing day
Okay.
by day.
fair.
And I think it's okay to have it day by day, but if I see, 0307,
Yep.
and now I see one 0309, I'll just get rid of the other one.
Okay.
The other thing I'd like to be clear on right now, because I'm not clear what we're doing, are we looking at the, each one of these articles in terms of its content, although we have a lot of blanks and things that could possibly change, or just in terms of format, or both in terms of do we include, do we not? We've gone through the do we include, this is our we are gonna include list.
So,
Well, I think, there's different words for format. I think the basic formatting, we're not talking about. I think it's okay. When I said, I used the word format, it was almost like the outline of the operating budget. Did we agree with that kind of language? And because we can't agree to it, because we don't know if we're gonna put an override in, we don't know. So I just meant, the language as it's there, the format of the language right, if we put it, but
The
everything
verbiage.
else,
We're talking about the verbiage as opposed to.
it's essentially the verbiage.
Verbiage,
right?
yeah, okay.
And, which is 2.5 in or out. So I think the only thing we're really looking at is the verbiage,
Okay,
okay?
I'm just trying to get clear what we're going through this
Verbiage.
for.
Verbiage.
yeah, I think it's.
I used the
verbiage
wrong
helps.
word when I said format
Yeah.
about the water department and about that.
We've agreed on the list of articles that we want to see.
No, we haven't. We haven't voted on them at all.
But we went through them all, this is a working list of articles we wanted to see. We took out some,
right.
we put some in, so this is, so maybe it is, do we still want to have this one in here, and so on and so forth. The second thing is, within each, the content where we know it, is it what we want? And then third is the verbiage and format, does it say it the way it needs to say it? to be legally and traditionally correct.
I guess, yeah, any and all changes that the board seems fit, that information will come back and I'll make those updates.
Okay.
Um,
So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get clear. How far are we in terms of we're okay right now? How far have we've gotten up to 11, is
I
it?
think we can go pretty, I
We're
mean,
at
I've,
11, right?
there's a lot of, from the content component and just edits, that I've gone through it since then, I have some sense if I've missed anything else, anything you've seen.
On
And then-
11, so on 11, in the explanation, the explanation ends with that arise during the fiscal year. So a lot of things that arise during the fiscal year are handled by the fire department's maintenance budget or the library's maintenance budget. So this is really needs that exceed appropriations available in the general operating budget. I'll give you these things. I'll send you this.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have to take great notes, as long as people have the concept and don't have a problem, I'll send you these things.
That sounds great, I'll just make a note just so I can place,
Yeah,
remind
yeah,
myself.
great.
Kevin, what
Great.
I think, talk with Stephen Whalen about this, but I would strongly recommend that the second,
We eliminated, you said,
the second consent agenda,
Second
just leave them all individual, we're gonna do it anyway that way.
you're
So
gonna
just
do it
them all as
anyway.
one? So
The
just-
first consent agenda, that stays
That's
together, but the second one needs to be broken down. We're gonna go through each one of them. one by one.
Eliminate them as a consent
Just
agenda.
Yeah,
take
don't-
off consent.
Just
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
off consent, and so you're just gonna have Article the 12th, we will deal with that as an individual.
Sounds
We
perfect.
deal with the 11th as an individual.
And I
because-
appreciate that guidance, because
No.
first time it's helpful to get those.
Well, we
things.
tried it, and we had the situation last year, maybe the year before, when the second consent were the less usual things or the larger expenditures and the less sort of pro forma. And people legitimately had a lot of questions, and so,
So do you want, so just for complete clarity, 1 asterisk or 0?
0.
Got it, perfect.
The single asterisk.
Zero, that's
So,
Is consent agenda 1. And what I would do is I would go after Article 10th,
Yeah, sorry.
and I would say end consent agenda 1.
Right.
And then, from that point on, there will be no asterisks, they will all be regular articles for the warrant.
Got it, perfect.
Great. And that way, people can't see it's a little boxed piece, oh yeah, this is the same.
Well,
same
we're doing that because people are gonna stand up and say, I wanna pull that out anyway.
Yeah, they'll pull 3 or
It
4
just,
out.
it doesn't, right, so
Yeah.
we all agree conceptually, because it's
Yes, we
our
do,
call
yeah.
as to whether it's a consent, okay.
Yeah, but I think we
I'd
should
like to do
that.
it with C.
That's great, thank you for that, that was,
Good.
that was helpful.
Okay.
All right, so the town repair, facilities repair and maintenance fund, add a little bit of language about
Yep.
exceeding. Police SUV cruiser, same language as last
Looks
year.
good.
I just changed the dollar amount because last year was a little bit different.
It was 62 last year, I like the 55.
Brought it down.
Nice going.
Working on it.
Okay.
Save
Telephone
seven-
system.
Save $7,000.
I'll take it. Town hall and library telephone.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna
There's
say-
something about it?
This, I just make sure, these are all still tie back dollar amounts to what was in that spreadsheet that I gave you around capital items. So these, that's just for clarity's sake.
Yep.
Nothing
So
changed on that.
in this particular case, in the warrant, the second line down at the end, new telephone system for town hall and library. Is it a single system or separate systems? I suspect it's separate systems, right? It's gonna be a computer here and a computer there? Or is it a single system?
I don't know.
Know off the top of my mind, but I can find that answer out. and
Because it's whether
correct it
it's,
accordingly.
whether
Yeah.
it's plural or singular is
That's all.
the
That's all.
question in part.
Perfect, I can do that.
That's good, yeah.
And then,
Last paragraph, you got a comment, Dick.
Meaningful explanation. Oh, the existing telephone system has experienced operational limitations higher. Those are general, what we call glittering generalities. My suggestion is we either do it, put in something more meaningful or strike it out altogether. I mean, it doesn't really tell anybody a lot of things, operational limitations, what does that mean? So, it's, again, my suggestion is we either come up with something that's meaningful for people, you know, like we can't answer calls if 3 people call at once, if there's some things like that. The better suggestion is probably to remove it, but let's go on. That's just a comment, you can take a look at it, see what you think.
Let me just make a little note.
Well, you could certainly leave it alone and let somebody in the audience bring up a discussion if they want to.
Sure, okay, yeah,
Okay.
we can do that too, but
Most
I
people-
prefer to see more meaningful explanations in
Most
general.
people who call the library, they get the library, it's not an issue. It probably matters much more to the library staff calling out to the Merrimack Valley region, everything, trying to keep the wheels turning.
I don't know.
And I know a lot of times what happens in these cases is they stop making that brand new telephone, and when the spares are gone,
You have to understand this, though, John. We installed one 6 years ago. There's a very strong possibility somebody's gonna stand up and say, I looked at my warrant from 6 years ago, and we spent blah, 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 on new systems in the library and the town hall.
we
Why
need
are
to
we
have
doing
that,
another
yeah.
one?
That's what we
So
need.
that's fine. So we just have to have the answers. It's nice to have the answers when they ask the
Yeah,
question.
that's exactly the reason.
Hopefully, they won't ask the question. But there are people
If
who
they do,
will.
we'll
But I
be
mean, it's a
prepared.
system based on Windows 7, and now they're not supporting Windows 7. There's the rationale. If we had that kind of a rationale, if the question
Yes,
comes
yes,
up.
exactly.
I
Okay.
would call on somebody from the library to
on-
explain why they need it.
Yeah, no, I think there's, I mean, the users are the ones who are suffering.
Yeah.
So-
But we do want to find out whether it's a system or systems, because somebody
Well,
might
that's
ask. I
that's the
suspect
question.
it's systems, but
Yeah,
that's what it is
I think
now. It's two
you're probably
separate
right,
systems.
Dick.
Yeah, I mean, because we have a different system
Next.
at the Department of Public Works.
Next, okay, 14 is the ballot tabulators. I talked with Beth on this. So I changed the wording here to say, the fact, they have to tell what they're doing, not simply to purchase 3. Okay, so we want to say, purchase 3 new tabulator/scanners. So it's not a tabulator and a scanner, it's a device that does both. So I
Single-
did it
single
with a
system,
slash,
single
I
system.
asked
Yep,
her if
that's
it's all
easy,
right.
yep, got it,
She
fine.
said that would be all
Yep.
right to do it that way.
That's good.
And then, so we fixed that throughout, okay. And then it says elections to replace obsolete equipment. I'm a little concerned that that's not a fact. I mean, obsolete means it's not usable. So I'm asking that we consider.
You can strike the word
perhaps-
obsolete if you'd like.
Yeah, something in that area.
You can just say that elections to
Existing.
replace equipment.
Replace
the new
existing.
equipment will-
Well, I'm not sure obsolete means that it's not functioning.
Yeah.
It means that you can't buy another one.
As I understand it, the machines that we have are secondhand.
They are.
And that those machines are at their useful life and that there's limitations on, you know, typically repairing something like that's not, it's usually. you
Sometimes
purchase
you
it.
say existing machines were purchased secondhand, and if it's appropriate, how many years ago, and say, and have reached their end of useful life.
You gotta be careful if they're still using them though, which we're gonna be doing
We are gonna use it.
before, right.
Yeah.
Let me wordsmith, see what I come up with, and share it with the board, and you guys let me know.
Great.
If we're gonna
Great.
change it,
Right. And then if we do say state mandates, we ought to be able to explain what state mandates are. I suggest that we wind up taking that out too, because I don't think there's a state mandate that says we're not complying with the state now.
Yeah. Look, what I'll do is I'll talk with Beth,
Well, you
and
could
we'll
put-
work on that.
You could
Good.
put
Beth is-
anticipated state mandates.
Yeah,
because
Beth is
that's what it's
Good,
about.
that I like.
What was
Okay.
that? Sorry.
Anticipated state.
Anticipated state
Good man.
mandate.
Right on. I like that.
Because it's not here yet,
That's
but
right,
it's coming.
that's right.
Yeah, I can live
That's
with
right.
that. I can live with
Thank
that.
you. That's exactly what it should be.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, so that's one I'll spend some real time on, see what we can get accomplished with the recommendations just provided. And the other thing, I did talk to Lynn earlier today. She asked for a little more clarification or an explanation of what exactly ranked choice voting is. Only because it's referenced here and it's a real consideration around the equipment. Just for people in the audience who might not know what that.
Strike it out.
I could strike, I think that it's
It's a key
possible, I think
requirement.
it's an important part, if we do,
Yeah.
it hasn't been voted on yet, it's gonna be at a referendum. Everyone's
That's
anticipating.
an
it's gonna be-
anticipated state mandate, so you could just,
It covers it.
It's
anticipated.
You
and then you know,
We
we
can speak to it.
Next.
then you don't have the
We
questions.
speak.
Put a period after mandates.
Right.
Excellent.
There we go.
Okay, on the north side radio thing, in the explanation, it refers to by installing a rooftop antenna. Do you have any idea what we're referring to there, rooftop? I mean, I just would take the word rooftop just by installing an antenna.
Okay, Yeah, I took that from the explanation from the capital list, but I can strike that language.
Well, you may have to answer then what a rooftop, why we're putting what roof are we putting it on? We may be putting it on the highway roof, but I'm not sure.
So I'll just say an antenna and repeater along Boston Street for improvement of radio
Yep.
communications.
Yeah, and then I
there's
just
a typo
changed
last
that,
line.
yeah, because we try to make this more average man reading kind of thing.
He
average
wants
person
to
reading.
strike the word for and put in to.
Yeah,
improve.
to improve,
Yeah.
simply Yeah.
Boston Street to improve.
to
Along
improve,
Boston
right?
Street.
Improve
Good,
radio communications in the north side of town.
okay.
Good.
On 16, I would change the title to Replace Fire Station Air Handler. I'm gonna send you these things,
Okay.
unless somebody, you know, we're here to discuss it. And the explanations on that, the fire station, in order to improve, I think it's heating efficiency, right? I mean, that's what kind of efficiency are we doing? I think it's heating efficiency and air quality and reduce
Yeah, I know it's
operational
air
costs.
quality as well as
Yeah.
heating efficiency.
Okay, so I just added heating in there, I think that's correct.
Okay.
And then I struck the last sentence here, existing equipment is below current standards and used, I mean,
It is what it
Need to
is.
be replaced.
It's explained in the
literally
guidance.
generalities,
Yeah,
right?
that's fine.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, because Lynn was asking about the current standards when I talked to her as well. She said, what current standards are we talking about? I said, well, the two reports we had said that they're at their useful life or beyond it, so.
Okay,
That's not like a state mandate.
17th, change the title to Fire Station Tight Tank for Drains. It's really not wastewater, people, you know, that sounds
No,
like.
that, it's
rain-
not, yeah, it's not really a wastewater.
Right, so
Fire
it's,
station tight tank.
and I think it.
Primarily a runoff.
Right,
It's when they wash the trucks off, it could be.
Well,
say-
ice and, when
It goes
ice melts
down.
and it's got
Yeah.
salt in it and they got oil
Everything
leaks
goes
and
down
all,
there.
and
Yeah.
oil leaks and everything.
Fire station tight tank installation, is that what it was?
just Fire Station Tight Tank for Drains.
That's it.
You don't have to say installation, you gotta do the
Okay.
drawings and everything, okay. And then, just on the wording of the warrant itself, Board of Selectmen is in the middle of the second line down. Board of Selectmen to purchase and install a tight tank, oh, this I knew, for supporting infrastructure. I think you gotta put that in, and supporting infrastructure. That's the best way to kind of catch the fact that we're not just putting a tank in, you gotta do other stuff with it. For the
Plumbing and
fire station
drainage, yeah, it's okay.
garage drains,
Yeah.
and then say, including design, construction, because design is part of the, engineering is part of the design, construction, and then all of that. So if that kind of wording seems okay with people, we'll go,
That's
is that
fine.
all right?
That's
Okay.
fine.
And then I just made the FinCom recommendation compatible with that.
Yep.
I sent you this, okay, then the wording, this ought to, we don't have to change this, but the way we used to write these things was, we don't want to assume that it's passed, see, this article would, quote, if passed, this article would fund the installation of a tight tank to collect water and contaminants such as road and engine deposits that enter the floor drains in the station's garage. I think that's basically it. I didn't talk about washing the vehicles, but,
That's
fine,
basically
okay?
it.
That's
So-
fine.
It's only
That's
such
fine.
as.
That's
Okay.
basically it.
Now, what I did do though, and that's the end, except that then I wanted to add, so to get people who have questions, this is similar to the town's highway garage tight tank that was installed when the building was constructed, and the police department's tight tank that was installed following approval by town meeting in 2008. Because some people were, didn't we do a tight tank? Yeah, we
Which
did in the police
building,
station in
when and why?
2008.
That makes sense.
Okay, so
Dick
I
knows
just
all the
have-
people who remember these things from 20 years.
This is
But
great.
there's also people who say, well, what about the highway garage and that?
Yeah.
Just put it in there, I think it'll
Okay,
save
that's
some.
great.
wrong with that.
No problem with
And
that.
it gives them information so that
Yep.
they feel like getting something useful. Okay.
Next.
Repair a fire engine pump, I just changed the explanation. This article would fund the repair of engine 3's pump. In its most recent annual test, the pump failed to meet both manufacturer's recommendations and National Fire Protection Association guidelines.
So you just put the manufacturing first.
I simplified it that way.
Yeah, that's
okay?
fine, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
19th, change the title to Study ADA Compliance at Stewart School. and
Should we
then,
spell out ADA to American Disabilities
no.
Act?
No.
no, because it's in the stuff if they
Okay.
want the
If
detail.
it comes
This
up,
is like an eye catcher. The idea of the title is kind of like an eye catcher.
Okay.
And ADA is a typical,
Well, we speak
People
in further
use that
in
one a
that,
lot.
in the recommended
Yeah.
that, it says Americans with Disabilities Act, so
right.
people should figure that out.
Sounds fine.
Right. And so I changed this to feasibility study to evaluate. You know, examine, I think it's really a matter of evaluating, bringing Stewart School into compliance with the current standards of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
They will survey and evaluate, observe and evaluate.
yeah,
Do I have to put survey in then?
I don't know, I don't have a problem with just evaluate, I think it's pretty clear.
Okay. So,
Could be to assess and evaluate.
Sure. I
Well,
mean,
you
it's,
said-
I mean, it's a great point, John, because it's more than just evaluating at the end of the day, because they're doing the due diligence, they're collecting data.
They're gonna go out across the parking
Yeah.
lot, you have to have legal minimum runoff pitches
Right.
for anything that's close to a
Yep.
curb cut, all this kind of stuff, so they'll be out there.
I'd be
There's a
fine
lot
with
of-
yeah.
So I think
me
it's
too.
just-
Me too.
so we're gonna change examine to assess and
And evaluate.
Okay?
Yeah.
And evaluate, bring the school, okay. And then to current standards of ADA,
Yeah.
okay. And this one,
And same thing with this article funds.
all incidental, okay. In this case, there are no incidental expenses, I would strike that because, you know, if you're doing some construction, you're trying to buy things and you're worried about whether they'll give you a hard time about buying a pencil. But this is a matter of assessing and evaluating, so those catch-all words I would strike, including all incidental and relative, unless somebody can come up with why that should be in there.
Yeah, and I would put assess and evaluate in the recommendation.
Oh, absolutely, and so what we try to do, here's the reason, if nothing else, you try to take what's in the warrant and put it in the recommendation to the extent that it fits, so that there's no question about, wait a minute, that wasn't in the, what I saw in the
Right,
warrant.
so they're gonna be parallel.
So we keep them parallel all the time, so point well taken, we gotta update those things the same way. And in some cases, I don't do it.
You understand that, Kevin?
Yeah,
That
so
was a whole bunch of verbiage.
I think so. So I got to the point where we're gonna put assess and evaluate in the title,
Yeah,
correct? So it's assess and evaluate ADA.
Oh, in the title, no, you don't have to.
No, not in the title.
In the first paragraph,
In the,
in
yeah,
the first paragraph, third line,
Oh, just keeping it the same.
and you're gonna put assess and evaluate,
Study
meaning
two.
Stewart School,
Yeah.
and then in the bolded recommendation, it will be feasibility,
in the same place, right
In
at
the same
start,
place, yes.
right. Instead of regarding, you know, it's gonna, it's a study to assess and evaluate. I don't always do it in both places once I'm going on to this, it's obvious that we have to do it. See, in one place they had examine, and the other place they had regarding and bringing, and I said, we gotta get,
So 20,000 has expanded the Board of Selectmen to procure feasibility, you want me to take out study, or do you want me to just take Board of Selectmen to procure a feasibility study to assess and evaluate bringing the Stewart School into compliance?
that'd work.
we need a TV here.
We should meet in the other room sometimes, it might be easier for this kind
Yeah,
of.
we just edit and go in
Okay,
real
It's
time.
and you
Yeah.
struck
Maybe next
the,
time.
including all incidental and related expenses. In both places.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah, I
we,
think so.
so, I've seen that in the other warrant articles.
Yes, it belongs in some of them, absolutely.
You're thinking this one because
Not
it's a
in the-
feasibility
not in the
study, not
study.
an actual
Right,
physical
not in the
construction
study.
project? Okay. Okay.
Okay, and then in the explanation, did I do this? No. This would fund a feasibility study to examine what changes and projects would be needed to bring the Stewart School, into compliance with the most recent standards of the American Disabilities Act. So I'll send you that,
You
if
have
that's
that.
okay with everybody, okay, good.
Yeah.
And then if we go to Proctor School, it's obviously the same thing.
My apologies, I just want to I did speak with Lynn earlier, so she just had a comment on that too. The one thing she said, we're talking about the content of what's in the news at this point, but she said more broadly, what type of exposure does having the study, and I know we've talked a little bit about that.
She's good about that.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that, so one thing I said I would do, and it was right for the meeting, so I didn't have a chance to meet, was I'd sort of double back and just find out. I think it's worth the 5 minutes on the phone with KP to just say, if we do this, what's the liability out there? Because
I don't think we need to go to lawyers to ask that.
Okay.
That's spending money to do things that, you just have to figure them out common sense wise. If somebody gives you something as a list, anybody can take you to court on that
Well,
list.
those-
Here's the
It
reason,
just asks for
here's the
trouble.
reason it came about. A parent made a complaint at Cole School, I think it was.
this
Yes,
is out of our district.
Out of our district, but that opened Pandora's box, where they had to do a study of that entire school. And it's closer to $1 million than $500,000 in changes required to come up to speed. That is not money they can put in the budget now, but they need to look at how big is the problem for the district,
Yeah.
so we can think about budgeting going forward. Because if we're gonna have to raise some here, we probably ought to raise some there at the same time. So that's the reason for it. There's an expectation that there would be action by some parents sometime. And if we're not in compliance, we would have to fix it with employees.
There's almost no question in my mind that if you do an appraisal of your ADA compliance and we don't comply, we're gonna have to fix it.
well, we don't
But you do
necessarily
anyway.
have to fix it.
Somewhere you gotta fix it.
Well, you don't have to. Well, we had an old town hall here that didn't comply with everything, and we didn't have to fix it.
Well, true. You don't
Because
get
the
a
law
complaint.
says
Yeah.
you do not have to keep bringing it
Yeah.
up to the most, because they keep changing it once a week. So once a week, you gotta go out there and change things.
Well,
So
yeah,
that's the
and
reason, it's very
We're waiting
logical.
for a complaint.
ADA.
If you get a complaint, then you gotta do something.
But-
ADA is different. If there's more than a ½ inch difference in height between two surfaces that a wheelchair student has to negotiate, you have to remediate that, period. And that is something that may not have been in the original ADA, has to be done now. Because in fact, it is a barrier to access.
There are some things that you do like that. Now, the question is, how do you deal with those things? And the way you deal with them is, obviously, if you've got something that is a problem for a wheelchair, and you have a wheelchair coming in for the first time to the school, you say, I gotta fix that, I know about that. If you don't know about it, and they point it out to you, you immediately take care of putting in a slope right there. You get the asphalt and the powder, and you fix it right then and there, within the next day, so that when the student arrives, it's okay. That is common sense, and that's the way you have to do it. This is opening up Pandora's box.
I checked into, I can circulate a legal article for you, a nice summary of ADA compliance, because I've had these issues myself.
Yeah.
What it basically says is you do not have to bring an existing building up to current standards, but you must make reasonable accommodations to anyone with a disability.
Okay.
And that's the reasonable accommodations for the 2 inches.
It's,
But if you can convince them,
That's the law.
if you can convince them that, you see that 2 inches there, but the walkway over here is okay.
If you got
Combination.
multiple entrances, only one has to be ADA
Right.
compliant.
Yeah.
So the one thing I'd say too, this is, talking with Dr. Morrison and understanding why this is being proposed. There was the incident, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, and their philosophy, their thoughts are, well, we got caught reactionary rather than proactive. We had to go to the access board. They had to spend time, money to sort of, I don't want to say argue, but to
Placing
discuss this. And what they're proposing, not just in Topsfield, but the other districts, is to do a similar feasibility study in all schools. Their hope is that then to look at that and address the low-hanging fruit, as you would say, the low cost. If it's, if a door handle needs to be 2 inches down, check that box, we can have someone
Okay,
on
now
the.
how we're gonna do it instead, we're gonna ask our ADA coordinator to please walk around the school and identify any obvious restrictions that we have.
if,
Jen Collins Brown. She can do that.
Well,
But I-
yeah, but are you saying instead of doing this?
Yeah.
So you wanna take that out?
I wanna take it out, but I have an out for you.
Okay.
Are we
Roller coaster.
going to do the math thing in this warrant? You know about the math?
I was gonna explain how,
Math and what?
math.
whatever.
Yeah,
I got that on Friday
This
night.
is something that has been added since we got involved.
Math and focus.
We have to be careful, I don't like things being added like this, but it's in here, so I'm gonna call it added to our list. Are we gonna leave it in here? If we're gonna leave it in here, then I say,
You talk about the ADA appraisal?
no,
Oh, you talking about something else?
What's
math and focus.
Well, we're gonna get
Where's
there.
Well,
that?
here's the reason, it's a strategy.